The first film I remember watching was actually Oliver and Company. It's an animated film that my parents took me out to see when I was a little kid. I grew up in Monterrey, Mexico, and back in those days, before the big chains, came in with, big theaters with 12 different options, you had very interesting little particular theaters. And so most of my childhood memories when it comes to films are also in those spaces. I remember one had a big dome. It was called the Rio 70. And it was this huge screen, the size of, 10 theaters nowadays. And it was a really special place for me as a kid to go and watch films there. Growing up, I remember seeing both, not the whole movie, but I remember watching clips of Lost Boys and Fright Night, which I think was the first time that I was introduced to vampires, were those films. And I remember, for example, Jerry Dandridge, played by Chris Sarandon in Fright Night. I remember his presence on screen was so huge and so powerful, and he seemed unstoppable to me as a kid. And also the makeup effects in Lost Boys just blew me away as a kid. And I think that the inner conflict of the character of Jason Patrick Michael in the story of the Lost Boys, and how he's becoming a vampire, but at the same time he wants to protect his family from the vampires. I think that's a core emotional thing that is in Voltaic Blood, and something that really affected me. That dynamic, that inner conflict. So those might be the beginnings of Voltaic Blood. And then I remember a huge movie for me as a kid was Predator. Probably why I'm, start getting into sci-fi horror, is Predator, and just how tactical it was actually really awesome. How the monster against a squad of elite soldiers, and how they kind of started dismantling each other's tactics and got down to the bare bones of, hand-to-hand combat. But all those moments of, Arnold Schwarzenegger discovering that if he puts on mud, then the Predator's thermal camera won't detect him, and things like that were such incredible moments for me as a kid, watching films and just learning the film language as I was watching these films. The soundtrack, is still iconic, classic. Every time I hear the soundtrack, I get transported back to the film, into those childhood moments with the film. But I think that tactical wise, tactics is actually something that I think goes hand in hand with cyberpunk, because there's a lot of options, there's a lot of gadgets, there's a lot of toys, there's technology, and both espionage and warfare become very kind of hand in hand, and into the themes and into the plot and things that are happening in the cyberpunk genre. And so I think going forward into Voltaic Blood, exploring those tactics and how the cyberpunk side is using cyberpunk technology tactics, and the vampire side is using vampire tactics, and how those will collide and clash, and there's a lot of fun to play there and room to explore. And that's why I'm attracted to studying the world of Shadowrun and the world of Vampire the Masquerade, which are both tabletop games where the character, gets to do certain actions and explore certain tactics. And those are some of the things that I look forward to studying and getting inspiration from for Voltaic Blood. And then talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger. Who can forget Total Recall? I think that was my first introduction into cyberpunk, because there's a lot of that film that is about, reality, and is this real? Am I still part of going through a simulation, or was this an actual real experience? That whole mind-bending side to cyberpunk, I was introduced to in that film. And who can forget the prosthetics of their faces bubbling as they deal with the atmosphere and things like that. That was that made an impression on me as a kid. And all those prosthetics and all those miniatures and all those visual effects that we miss a lot now in the digital age. But I think that we should still keep exploring and pursuing and having fun with those practical effects. So it's talking about miniatures. Blade Runner wasn't something I really watched until later in life. So this was really an introduction for me for miniatures and prosthetics and things like that. And it's something that with Voltaic Blood, I want to do those practical effects, those miniatures, to help add that retro flavor to the story, that texture to the story. And then another big one growing up was Speed. I remember Speed was the first time that I went back to the theater several times to watch a movie. And I just remember the kinds of feelings that it evoked. The tension, the kind of on the edge of your seat kind of action, and the kind of cat and mouse dynamic that the protagonist and the villain were playing. Later on, it became Saving Private Ryan, was one that I watched many times in the theater. Again, very tactical film, especially the end battle scene where they actually really go into detail as to how they're going to defend that city and that bridge, what weapons they're going to use, what positioning, all of that I loved as a kid. And then I think once I hit high school and college, I started getting more into the classics. I started getting more into Charlie Chaplin, into Kurosawa, into Tarkovsky, into exploring just different styles of filmmaking from many famous filmmakers around the world that helped just expand my experience of film and what could be done in film.